Hare Krishna devotees, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, let's get started. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yasodhanandana Braja Janarandana. Yasodhanandana Braja Janarandana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yasodanandana Braja Jana Randana. Yasodanandana Braja Jana Randana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yasodanandana Braja Jana Randana. Yasodanandana Braja Jana Randana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Gopramande Hari Hari Bol. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 4, and today's text is text number 15. So it's a very short, sloka. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Yat Chirsanya Charitam Tat Anuvartate Loka. Yat Chirsanya Charitam Yat Tat Anuvartate Loka. Synonyms: Yat whatever. Sirsanya, by the leading personalities. Acharitam, performed. Tat that. Anuvartate, follow. Loka, the people in general. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Whatever action is performed by a great man, common men follow. Purport. A similar verse is also found in the Bhagavad Gita 3:21. It is essential for human society to have a section of men perfectly trained as qualified brahmanas, according to the instructions of Vedic knowledge. Those below the Brahminical qualifications, administrators, merchants, and workers, should take instruction from those ideal people who are considered to be intellectual. In this way, everyone can be elevated to the highest transcendental position and be freed from material attachment. The material world is described by Lord Krishna himself as Dukhayalam Asasvatam, a temporary place of misery. No one can stay here, even if he makes a compromise with misery. One has to give up this body and accept another, which may not even be a human body. As soon as one gets a material body, he becomes Deha Brit or Dehi. In other words, he is subjected to all material conditions. The leaders of society must be so ideal that by following them, one can be relieved from the clutches of material existence. Om Gyana Chimarandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurummitam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurube Namaha Vanchakapatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhurevacha Patitanam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasti Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Whatever action is performed by a great man, common men follow. So, of course, in this chapter, we're reading about the characteristics of Rishabdev, the Supreme Personality, who is none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, we've read that. Oh, sorry, Parijata is telling me what I missed out. In this chapter, Rishabdev, the son of Maharaja Nabi, he had begotten, we all read earlier that he had begotten 100 sons, and during the reign of those sons, the world was very, very happy in all respects. So we, of course, we have read that Rishabdev is none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, having taken birth as the son of Maharaj Nabi. So, the Bhagavatam, of course, for those that, have read it from cover to cover, there's just so many amazing descriptions given in the Bhagavatam. Just, the way sentences are put together, all of it is just so amazing. It's explained that Rishabdev, he was appreciated by the people as the most exalted and beautiful personality of that age. His poise, influence, strength, enthusiasm, bodily luster, and other transcendental qualities were all beyond compare. Can you imagine having such, a person in our midst, and just a completely perfect being? Of course, the word Rishabha refers to the best or the supreme. And so, such was the qualities of Maharaj Nabi. It's explained how he strictly followed the Varnashram system. And in due course of time, we understand, of course, now we're living in the age of Kali Yuga, that this Varnashram system had become neglected. And we see in this age of Kali Yuga, age of quarrel and hypocrisy, there's just so much of confusion, so much of deceit, so much of misery. And of course, having lost all of these qualities of the original Varnashram system, society is gradually just degrading further and further. In the previous verse, we also read how by following this Varnashram system in a regulated way, the general populace can, gradually improve themselves and become perfect, become eligible to go back home, back to Godhead. One point in the previous verse was mentioned that this Varnashram Dharma is meant for imperfect conditioned souls. And so, of course, naturally, nobody wants to be put into that category of being imperfect, being conditioned souls. But actually, this is our condition. If we can analyze it from so many different points of view, but this is our actual condition, that, we're all in the material world, suffering the miseries of birth, old age, death, and disease. And of course, in the purport for this verse, Prabhupada is explaining that this verse, whatever action is performed by a great man, common men follow, is also a verse found in the Bhagavad Gita 3:21. And in that purport, Prabhupada is explaining how people in general always require a leader who can teach the public by practical example. And of course, we understand that, this is the meaning of Acharya, one who teaches by practical example. And in the purport also, Prabhupada is explaining a leader cannot teach the public to stop smoking if he himself smokes. So in this way, we see that, Lord Chaitanya has come to give this Sankirtan Yagya, teach by his personal example. So, in the life and pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, we see, his exemplary life that he led and how he taught by his personal example. So the teachers of society today have to teach by their personal example. For those of you that, follow the news, I was just shocked, in the last several weeks, there's just been so many cases of teachers, school teachers, just abusing children in schools, throughout the country. People have so much of trust and faith in teachers, sending their children to schools to be protected, to be educated. But there's just so many teachers just abusing children. And, these are not, of course, teachers that have some qualification. They have to study. So, these are not just people off the street in one sense. They have, taken that time to go to school, to get a degree. So, it seems like, of course, these educated, so-called educated people are also just so confused and causing so much of havoc in society today. People are trusting still. They are just abusing children. And it's just not, one case. It's just been in the last few weeks, there's just been at least 5 or 6 cases in different schools. The last one was a couple of days ago. Sorry, for those of you that do follow the news. And she was the wife, 26 years old. She was the wife of the police superintendent, the chief police superintendent at one of the police stations. So, people seems to have achieved, some sort of position in society, but still, because they're not properly trained in the leadership qualities of, true leaders, according to what's given in the Shastra, going to get so-called mundane education is not helping them very much. So, of course, a lot of these people just end up being incarcerated in jail, for long periods of time. And, yet these people are reading, these things on news also, but still they're not afraid, to go down that route, thinking that the result will be different for them. They'll never get caught. This is the madness that's going on in society today. So in the Bhagavad Gita, in those verses 21, 22, 23, even Krishna is testifying In 23, he explains, for if I ever failed to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, certainly all men will follow my path. So even Krishna himself, we see, in so many places, he gives the example that, he was also teaching by his personal example, even though he was, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Still, just because of this point that, common men will follow, he had to act properly and engage in his prescribed duties. Of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, we can see sometimes Krishna is a little funny in that in so many places he mentions, in my opinion. I always get amused when I read that here's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's saying, in my opinion. So, of course, he's giving, the living entities an option that, okay, if you don't want to accept it as fact, even if it is, here it is. This is my opinion as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in verse 24, he's saying, if I did not perform prescribed duties, all the worlds would be put into ruination. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. So just see how concerned, Krishna was for the living entities, that, he was acting by his own personal example, teaching by his own personal example, concern for all the living entities. Of course, he wants all of us to come back home, back to Godhead, and, not undergo all these material trials and tribulations. So, of course, in that purport, Varna Sankara is unwanted population, which disturbs the peace of the general society. In order to check this social disturbance, there are prescribed rules and regulations, which the population can automatically become peaceful and organized for spiritual progress in life. So this is the Varnashram system that's being described. So, of course, we understand Varnashram. There's Gandhi's proposed Varnashram system, but Srila Prabhupada is recommending Devi Varnashram, that, we keep Krishna at the center of this Varnashram organization of society. Initially, I've read that, Prabhupada did not initially put so much emphasis in the early days of, establishing the movement, establishing ISKCON, preaching extensively. There was not so much of emphasis. But of course, Prabhupada saw that, so many men that were falling down, so many devotees were falling down and having so many challenges. And of course, we understand, by the time Srila Prabhupada left, his last desire was, to come to Gita Nagari to, teach us, how to live off the land, how to, establish the Varnashram system. ISKCON's, of course, main purpose initially was Prabhupada wanted to create, a Brahmanical class of men, systematically being trained in the Shastra, in the Vedic conclusions. And in this way, people would follow the Brahmanas, and everybody would, be engaged according to their propensity. So this is what, we're all trying to establish, come to terms with, trying to, figure it out, how to organize society. There's just so much going on in the world today, so much of corruption, that sometimes it seems overwhelming. But, staying with, or staying in the association of like-minded individuals, having opportunities like we are right now, to discuss the Shastra, to discuss these verses, there definitely is some hope that, we can have some effect, if not for the world in general, just because there's just so much of living entities, human beings for that matter, just for our own sanity, so that, we can become qualified to go back home, back to Godhead. Of course, we are more interested in sharing this precious knowledge that we have come across by some great fortune with others, so that others can join us in this journey back home, back to Godhead. So we understand that taking a spiritual master is pivotal to this journey of spiritual life, and in this way being gradually trained to go back home, back to Godhead. So Prabhupada, of course, in many places, he insists that, to solve all of these problems, these material miseries, there must be a class of men who are Brahmanically trained. There's a saying that says, a genuinely detached man sees no need for work, but he also sees no need to give up work. He simply works as a matter of duty and without desire for the results. He also sets the right examples for others, because whatever a great man does will always be followed by the ordinary. So we see so many examples being given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the Vedic scriptures, of great personalities who became bewildered from time to time. Recently, in the 4th canto, we read about how Lord Indra, when Maharaj Prithu was performing the Ashwamedha sacrifice, the 100-horse sacrifice, that Indra was definitely very envious that his position might be usurped, that he started to create this disturbance amidst the sacrifice, and he actually ended up stealing the horse. And so even in this example, the way he went about doing it, he was dressed up as a sannyasi, pretending to be a sannyasi, and just creating so much of confusion and havoc, because again of this principle that people would see him performing these so-called attractive sinful activities, and they'll also follow his examples. So great personalities have to be very, very mindful how they act, behave, speak, because we see that in Indra's case, for his own sense gratification, he wanted to defeat Maharaj Prithu. So eventually we've seen that canto in those chapters that Lord Brahma, he thought that instead of allowing Indra to further introduce such irreligious systems, it would be better to stop the sacrifice. That was part of his advice. We see the example of Lord Buddha in this respect. People were overly engrossed in animal sacrifices, which were recommended by the Vedic scriptures. And of course, we see that Lord Buddha, he had to introduce a religion of non-violence by contradicting the Vedic sacrificial instructions. So, of course, people in general, they were using this example of, sacrifice and, extending it to just killing unnecessarily poor animals just to satisfy the appetite. They missed the point that in these yagyas that were performed, the animal was given a new body. So, potent brahmanas were performing the yagya, the sacrifice, and there was an arrangement that, these animals were given a new life. But of course, these days, we should not be killing animals, because there's no longer, these potent brahmanas existing in this age, especially. So we see that Lord Buddha appeared to stop, such sacrifices. So the recommendation, in this age, of course, is the Sankirtan Yagya, the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. And in this way, we can perfect our lives. So we understand from the scripture that Yagya has to be performed to Lord Vishnu. Otherwise, how will society be happy? We have to perform Yagya. So better, rather than performing all these animal sacrifices for which we do not have these qualified brahmanas to perform, we perform this Sankirtan Yagya. So the example Prabhupada gives of this, Varanashram system, just like in your body, there must be a head, there must be the arms, there must be the belly, and there must be the legs. Similarly, he gives the analogy that the Brahmana is like the head, the Kshatriya is the arms, the Vaishya is the belly, and the Sudra are the legs. So every, part of the body has its function. The head has to do its duty, the legs have to do its duty. And in this way, everything works very harmoniously. Then we can walk, then, we can perform so many activities. But if, for example, Prabhupada says, if the head is cracked, then everything is gone, madman. So in this way, the whole idea has been to try to create this Brahmanical class. And of course, everybody cannot be Brahmanas. Everybody doesn't have the capacity to think, to study the Shastra. Everybody's propensity is different. So according to our propensity, we all need to engage in our prescribed duties. So in this way, if there's cooperation between these for Varanas and ashrams, then things can work very, very harmoniously. So Prabhupada says that a section of people must be very intelligent class of men, Brahmana. And of course, this can be achieved by training. If it is their propensity, then they can be trained. It's not like you're born, with all of this knowledge. All of a sudden, there has to be training. And so there has to be systematic training of the Shastra. A section of people may be very strong Kshatriyas, fighters, politicians. Of course, in this day and age of Kali Yuga, we see there are politicians, but we can just see how corrupt they are. Again, for those of you that do follow the news, there's just been this landmark victory. Fox News, it was so much of lies being propagated that the company that sells these machines for counting the votes, they sued, this media outlet, not just Fox News, just so many other. There's, more lawsuits pending, but they won the case, the settlement of $800 million. They actually sued for, what was it, 1.5, 1.6 billion. So yeah, just so much of crazy propaganda going on these days. People have become so attached to social media. But devotees, of course, have to be very, very careful, how to discern these things. So especially for, this type of media, we need to be very, very mindful, because, these days there's just so much of cheating going on, that to the point where, legally speaking in the courts, they were able to prove that, there was just so much of lies going on. It seems like politicians, at least in the USA, and of course, the rest of the world too, have reached a point where, discerning between truth and fact is, very, very difficult to discern these days. And even, again, on this principle of whatever a great man does, common men will follow. We see that our leaders and politicians, are just cheating, their constituents. They're just, selling a whole bunch of lies to them, and people are still following. Yeah, it seems like since the last election in our country, just things have just changed so drastically. People are not afraid to just blatantly speak lies. And of course, we remember our previous president saying that if you speak the lies enough, people will start to believe it, openly. And this is the case today, So apart from, this principle being true, just repeating lies, society, is so gullible, so untrained, have, no sense of proper education in terms of, who am I, what is my purpose? They've become so gullible that, they're just able to believe these sorts of lies. Whereas, true leaders, the true brahmanas, they have no personal interest, only the interest and welfare for the society of large. So in this way, they are able to give knowledge to, train up others and direct, society to become prosperous, like it was in the previous ages. But of course, we see, Kali Yuga is progressing at a rapid rate, and devotees are trying their best to, follow the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and trying to also help others by preaching this Krishna consciousness all over the world. We understand the material energy is, very, very powerful. We see, even Prabhupada was saying, about his disciples at the time that, they are not sufficiently afraid of Maya. That, here he is, as an acharya, he's praying every day. Prabhupada is saying he's praying every day, not to be influenced by Maya. But we see so many devotees, had so much of difficulties. But still, so many great devotees in the past, have done so much of service for Prabhupada that, Prabhupada, of course, won't forget, how they helped so much, even though they're, off the track at some point. We hope and pray that they will also, be able to come back. So we should always, have a open door in this regard. So there's also Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, has written some nice, two nice leadership books. One second, let me just grab a copy here. Where Maharaj, discusses, of course, in leadership 2, specifically, he discusses the instructions of Bhishma Dev. Of course, we understand, Bhishma Dev was such an amazing, great ruler. So all of his instructions, Maharaj has compiled into a nice book. Maharaj dedicates this book to all the leaders that he has met whilst he was on the planet. So, there's just so much of nice information, of course, given by Bhishma Dev, but he's, presented in such a way that it becomes, very, very relevant for our society today. So, leaders can meditate on in a very secular way. Also, it's being presented. So Maharaj, for example, he gives the 10 characteristics of a servant leader. And, there's just so much information about servant leadership and how it works. So the 10 characteristics Maharaj gives here: a servant leader is a deep lover of the people. Number 2, a servant leader helps people feel happy and secure. Number 3, a servant leader creates lasting value. Number 4, a servant leader is a philosopher. A servant leader leads from the inside out. A servant leader is principle-centered. Servant leader is a powerful visionary. A servant leader keeps everyone engaged according to their propensities. A servant leader is an expert in delegation and empowerment. And number 10, a servant leader leaves behind a culture of enduring excellence. So as you can see, these are very high ideals, for leaders, not just in the secular world, but even leaders within our movement, within ISKCON, all the temple leaders, everybody in leadership capacity. So we should all, study these things and try to learn and execute these principles. So Marge gives the definition in one sense of a true servant leader. Is able to assess the primary needs of his followers and compassionately serves them, having a profound understanding of the highest good beyond material requirements and servicing the soul, the real identity of each and every individual. So that's the trick, in one sense, that we want to go beyond the material. Because, as Prabhupada says in the purport, well, of course, he's quoting Lord Krishna. The material world is described by Lord Krishna himself as Dukhayalam Asasvatam, a temporary place of misery. No one can stay here, even if he makes a compromise with misery. So for those of us that, might be expert in deal making, because so many, politicians, so many people from all business people, so many people are always trying to make, deals. But of course, if one has a little experience in the material world, we'll see that this is a fact, a true statement, that no one can stay here, even if he makes a compromise with misery. Because we all understand that death can come at any moment. Even for Gandhi himself, death was there, not when he expected, but death can come at any moment. We see so many prime ministers, so many presidents being killed. Just recently, I think, what was it, last year? Former Prime Minister of Japan. He was engaging in some political work. Just standing on a podium and giving a talk, and somebody got out a gun and just killed him. So this material world, it's a temporary place. There's just countless examples given in the Shastra. Thinking of this one example of liquid beauty. For those of you familiar with that example, there was this beautiful lady, and some man had seen her, and he just wanted to be with her, to get married immediately to her. And she made an arrangement that you should come at such and such time, and you should meet me at my house. And of course, he became very, very excited that yes, deal arranged. I'll meet you there. And of course, what she did during those few days was she had fasted, taken lots of laxatives, and so in this way she was constantly vomiting and passing stool and things like that. But she was collecting all of these things in this pot, and she had stacked all of them, all these gross things, she had stacked them in pots. And of course, engaging in this activity, her features had also deteriorated. She was no longer this so-called beautiful woman. And so when this person comes and knocks on the door, he's expecting this so-called pretty, beautiful woman to answer the door or to be there in the home. And when she opens the door, he sees this not so pretty person, and he inquires, where is she? And of course, she takes him and shows, opens all these pots and says, yes, she is. And so then, she explains that the purport, of course, was that all this so-called beauty is contained in these pots. That this is the material body that undergoes different experiences from time to time. So we understand, there's so many examples given of this material world being a temporary place, so that even if we make a deal, we just never know when death is going to come, and we're going to be forced to accept another body. Despite whether we believe in karma, don't believe in karma, death is sure to come. So the idea is that, we should try to elevate ourselves to become qualified to be able to go back home, back to Godhead, not be stuck in this cycle of birth and death, because, of course, we don't know, like Prabhupada is saying in the purport, we don't know what type of body we're going to get. If we get a human body, if there was a guarantee of us getting a human body again, then sure, why not, some may say. But we just don't know what type of body we're going to get. According to our karma, according to our activities, we're just going to get an animal's body, and just continue transmigration from the animal's body again. So from all ways that you look at it, no matter what type of deals you try to make, it's just a bad bargain, being in this material world. And then Prabhupada says, in the end, the leaders of society must be so ideal that by following them, one can be relieved from the clutches of material existence. So we see, the classic example given in the Bhagavad Gita is, Arjuna. Arjuna, of course, didn't want to fight. In the beginning, he was very, very confused. Of course, he gave some very powerful reasons of, why he didn't want to fight. And we see that, they made sense, from a logical point of view. But we see how Krishna defeated every one of those reasons he gave, because, Arjuna was proposing, let me go to the forest, meditate. There's no, need for this ghastly war. I don't want to fight. But, based on the principles of religion, Krishna was able to show Arjuna that, just by fighting, doing his duty, he can be relieved, of all sinful reactions. That if one does things in proper consciousness on the transcendental platform, not in the mode of goodness even. Of course, gradually we want to try to see how to elevate ourselves to come to the mode of goodness, because we use the mode of goodness as a springboard to get onto the transcendental platform. So if we are able to follow in this way, come to the mode of goodness and get onto the transcendental platform, then our destination, can be assured. We won't feel so much the effects of the material world. We can be living within the material world, but not be so affected by what's going to happen, because this body is going to get old. We are going to get sick. We are going to experience so many things in this material body, but we should understand, for the benefit of the soul, that and not get disturbed by these things. Okay, I'll stop there. Any comments, questions, devotees?
Hare Krishna, Dhruva, thanks for giving class. I just had one comment. So you're mentioning, about getting a human birth in the next life. And I was kind of meditating on this when dealing with some plants that have died, and, we want to make ourselves feel better. So we try to put in an intention that they go back to God, or they receive a human birth in the next life. But especially after your class, it's realizing that, just attaining a human birth is not good enough. We need to try to strive for, or put an intention to live a conscious human birth in the next life, if that's the case, with all of your examples of the material world. And then on that note, I just wanted to kind of ask, because we saw all of these things happening in the material world, people being exploited, all of these examples you give of teachers abusing children. And so we put our faith in something else, right? So we start seeking something different. So then we come maybe to Krishna consciousness, things like that. And then, not to be a Debbie Downer, but we see these things happen in Krishna consciousness. So how do we kind of not let our eyes wander to something after we see that? Like, how do we try to still like have faith when maybe we lost faith in the material world for these reasons, and then we're seeing, very similar things happen when we're trying to like devote our life to God, to something higher. And yeah, so how can we go about that?
Yes, thank you, Katie. Nice example. Nice question. Yes, of course, Prabhupada wanted us to read, the books at least 2 hours every day. So, books are there for us to follow, to guide us. So the trick is, of course, we're human beings. We're able to think. And the idea is not to become blind followers. I'm remembering now, Bhakti Chaitanya one time gave the example, I think it was in Cape Town. And he was saying that, here I am, a sannyasi in ISKCON, trying to preach this Krishna consciousness, in so many different locations. But for example, if you come, to the morning program, we do Mangal Artik, we do Tulsi Puja, and after Tulsi Puja, I step outside the temple and, I take out a cigarette and start smoking. You're going to know that this is just bogus immediately. And so, yes, we are all, of course, conditioned souls, since time immemorial. Sometimes it's difficult to understand, what does that mean, being conditioned since time immemorial? We can't figure out exactly when it happened and, how many millions and gazillions of births we've taken, transmigrating from one body to another. So it is very, very difficult for us to understand, this term of condition. But yet at the same time, the scriptures now, very good literatures, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, so much, literature is available. So we need to be, mindful of becoming a blind follower. We read the qualities of Brahmanas, and we need to be able to see them in Brahmanas if we're going to follow. So we need to use our intelligence to that degree to be able to, navigate this material world, so to speak. Anyone else wants to add to that?
Hi, Krishna. Good morning. Thank you for your class, Dhruva. Thank you, Prabhu. It was wonderful. Since yesterday's class, I've been really meditating on, there are two Christian proverbs. One is that to him whom much has been given, of him much is required. And the other is that don't try to take a spot out of your brother's eye when you've got a giant veil over your own. And both your class and Daksha's class made me think of these two things and meditate on them a lot. That, first of all, in this material world today, people don't even think that this human life has been given, that it's a boon, that it's been bestowed upon them by the Lord. It's not something that they just created for themselves. And we live in a culture of, get mine and, self-made and all of this nonsense. But, in Krishna consciousness, we really should be conscious of the fact that this is a wonderful gift. And so therefore we have great responsibility. And even this today about leaders, it's a great responsibility. It's not, a privilege. It's a responsibility also. There's an obligation in any position of leadership to lead, and I think in one of the purports it said, not into the ditch, like that's not going to work out very well. And then the other thing is that when I see these things, whether it's in the material world or in Krishna consciousness, one finger points out, three point back at me. So it's an opportunity to look and say, am I guilty of something like that? Even if it's condemning someone, I need to look at that and I need to work on that in me. And it doesn't mean that you don't hold people accountable, but it just means that I also first and foremost have to be accountable to Krishna, to the devotees, and to myself, to grow spiritually, and to be contributing to this movement and to society at large, to be someone who's bringing something useful and valuable, Krishna consciousness, even if it's just chanting more rounds, just bringing the holy names into the world more, but do something along those lines, because we've been given this wonderful, wonderful gift. And just to say we're fortunate is not enough. We have to be responsible.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, so much of responsibility is there. We shouldn't also be, like you're saying, we shouldn't also just be waiting, who's going to lead, who's going to, take the responsibility. Each one of us, has that capacity, to inspire, even if it's just one person, that we're friends with, just one family member, just a close friend, even if we can do it at that level of leadership, that responsibility is there. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. Anyone else? Comments, questions?
Hare Krishna, just on that last kind of like question that Kaylee posed, I know one thing that's said that's been very nice is that, the Krishna conscious movement is like a hospital. And so, it's a hospital in the material world. So it's kind of expected that people will be sick and bad things will, there'll be diseases in the hospital. But the main thing is that the leaders, or the hospital heads are trying to keep the hospital pure. That's the main thing. But, in a hospital, these diseases are there. Some people go to the hospital and get more sick than when they came in. So this is just the nature of the beast. But yeah, it's that as long as the leaders are trying to keep it pure, that's the main.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, nice point, Das. Yeah. Other comments, questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much. It's nice to hear from you. I have a question in the chat, but I'm afraid that you may not be able to read it, so I just say it out loud. Your class is very sobering, and I wonder how to maintain that level of sobriety, because I guess many times I forget and I'm swayed by the allurement of material enjoyment and forget that this material world is actually full of miseries, and also living outside the strong association with the devotees as well is very difficult. So how to maintain that level of sobriety?
Yes, it is always tough. That's why the recommendation, is to chant 16 rounds, a minimum of 16 rounds, and to read Prabhupada's books. And then, of course, as much as we can, try to, get more association of devotees. And in this way, we can all help each other. So, it's just a constant endeavor. It's not like, we can let our guards down at any time, because, Maya's, we see it everywhere in the Shastra, so many devotees, mention this, but, Maya is always, around the corner, just waiting to pounce. So we, like Prabhupada said, we have to become sufficiently afraid of Maya, not to the point of paranoia, that we fail to act and, fail to do anything and don't participate in this Krishna consciousness. So we, of course, we have to not go to the other extreme, but at the same time, we need to be sufficiently afraid that, Maya can be so tricky, it's a razor's edge, spiritual life. Sometimes you must have heard that saying that, it's like a razor's edge that, in one sense, this gradual elevation in Krishna consciousness is possible. But at the same time, Maya is always waiting around the corner to allure us, with so many material things. So if we don't have proper association, we need to have, proper association, like-minded people that, can always be there for us, around us. Chant regularly. This will, elevate our consciousness so that, we don't get trapped in the lower modes. So we need to have, some goals in life, short-term, medium-term, long-term goals, set for ourselves that, we can gradually help elevate ourselves. So just on that point quickly, this idea of, devotees who live in the temple are better than devotees who stay and work outside. There's just so many places where Prabhupada has, refuted that, that devotees don't have to, feel guilty about it. It's just about our different natures, where we're at, and, there's different responsibilities we all have. So we have to be, not get caught up in this whole cycle of, getting mental about, should I work, shouldn't I work? Maybe I should go live in the temple, because, temple life is not cut out for everybody. And, we're of course very grateful for you pursuing your studies and career. Mental health, we can see, is on the rise. It seems like, of course I don't have any statistics on hand to back it up, but it seems like it's just getting to, be almost exponential, from what we can see what's happening in the material world. So mental health, is becoming a big thing. And yes, I know most people want to, but of course, what you're doing is very, very noble. We admire you so much for, pursuing this, career in mental health, so that, you can help so many devotees in the future, with the training that you receive. So training is required, and when there's proper training, it can be dovetailed in Krishna consciousness, and so many other devotees can be helped. So thank you for all your contributions. And yes, recently I heard that 40% of the population in the USA has a diagnosable mental health disorder. Yes, that's exactly. Wow, that's, yes, Mother Ananya Bhakti is quoting some statistics. So yeah, at Gitanagari, we've had so many students come by, and we just see the broad spectrum. And these days, of course, people are not afraid to speak about it, that there is some mental condition, challenge, in different forms it takes. Yeah, it's just difficult in the material world. So okay, any more comments, questions, devotees? Thank you for your time. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
can attach this to that. To make it. I don't even know. You can just,